Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into how a school of rational theology and a path of mystical spirituality came together to become one of the most dominant forces in Islamic thought. And trust me, this isn't just some dusty old history. It's a connection that defines mainstream Islam for millions of people right now. So that brings us to the big question, right? How on earth did a school focused on logical, doctrinal arguments and a tradition all about spiritual experience get so tangled up with each other? We're going to unpack the key figures, the big ideas, and the history that forged this really powerful alliance. Okay, so to get this, we first need to know who the players are. On one side, you've got Asharism. Think of it as the intellectual defenders of the faith, using rational arguments to back up core Islamic beliefs. And on the other side, you have Sufism. This is all about the inner, mystical side of Islam, focusing on spiritual purification and, direct experience of the divine. They sound like they're from different planets, but you'll see their connection runs surprisingly deep. And this isn't some new thing, not at all. The sources show this relationship goes way, way back, right to the earliest days of Ash'arism itself. It suggests there was always this kind of natural pull between them. I mean, the evidence is right there from the get-go. Check this out. A servant of the school's founder was actually known as a sheikh of the Sufis. Then you have one of al-Ash'ari's direct students who was also a Sufi. And just a century later, a top Ash'ari scholar, al-Baghdadi, officially put Sufis right inside his definition of Sunni orthodoxy. So yeah, the overlap was there from the beginning. It was foundational. So the connection was old, for sure. But it took a few key figures to really build a formal bridge, to turn that informal affinity into a powerful and, a lasting intellectual alliance. Three scholars in particular really stand out for cementing this whole thing over a really crucial period in Islamic history. So let's take a look at the first two architects of this synthesis, al-Qushayri and the very famous al-Ghazali. Abu al-Qasim al-Qushayri. This guy was an absolute game changer. In his famous work, the Risala, he made this groundbreaking argument. He basically said, hey, you know those earliest, most respected Sufi masters? Their beliefs, their core creed, it's identical to the Ash'ari creed. I mean, what a brilliant move, right? It created this explicit doctrinal foundation for the merger. He was telling both sides, guess what? You've been on the same theological page all along. And then came the towering figure of Abu Hamid al-Ghazali. Look, if al-Qushayri laid the foundation, al-Ghazali basically built a skyscraper on it, with his masterpiece, The Revival of the Religious Sciences. He just seamlessly wove Ash'ari theology into the very fabric of Sufi spiritual practice. He made the whole synthesis accessible, practical, and incredibly popular. So what was the theological glue here? What held them together so perfectly? Well, the sources point to a specific and honestly a fascinating doctrinal opening that basically let Sufi thought walk right through the Ash'ari door. Okay, so here's how it worked. The Ash'aris, trying really hard to avoid describing God in human terms, developed this idea that God isn't located in a specific place. He's neither inside the world nor outside it. Now, that's a pretty abstract idea, and it created this intellectual space. The Sufis saw that space and built on it. They moved from the idea that God is simply everywhere to the idea that God is the very essence of everything that exists. And that became the basis for the famous concept of the unity of being. And what you get from this theological synergy is a really complete religious identity. For a lot of Muslims, it meant you'd follow, say, the Shafi school for your daily legal stuff. You'd be an Ash'ari in your core beliefs about God. And you'd be a Sufi in how you practice your spirituality. It was this perfect integration of law, doctrine, and spirit. Now, this intellectual marriage didn't just stay in the books. Oh no, it became the dominant way of thinking in later centuries, spreading like wildfire across all the major centers of the Islamic world. It basically shaped religious education for millions. And the influence was just vast. We're talking from the prestigious El-Azhar in Cairo to the Levant, all across North Africa, Yemen, India, Turkey, Chechnya. This synthesis became the gold standard. It was the curriculum in so many of the most influential Islamic institutions. In a lot of ways, it became the mainstream. And this whole long historical process, this fusion of doctrine and spirit, it all culminated in a very recent and very high-profile event that brought centuries of history right into the modern day. So in 2016, at a conference in Grozny, Chechnya, A bunch of prominent scholars got together and issued a formal declaration. They defined what Sunni orthodoxy, al-Hal Sunnah, is. And how did they define it? By this historical synthesis. You follow the Ash'ari or Maturidi's school for your creed, one of the four legal schools for law, and you embrace Sufism for your spiritual path. It was a modern public stamp of approval on this centuries-old alliance. All right, so let's zoom out. What's the big takeaway from this whole journey through intellectual history? What does it all really add up to? Well, we've seen how this relationship started with these early kind of informal links between scholars. Then it was systematically built up by those bridge builders like Al-Kushairi and Al-Ghazali. It got even stronger thanks to that deep theological synergy, and eventually it solidified into the dominant force that it is today in so many parts of the Muslim world, even getting a formal declaration in our own time. And that leaves us with one last big question to think about. When a specific fusion of theology and spirituality becomes the definition of the mainstream, what does that mean for the incredible diversity of Muslim identity? And what does it mean for the future of Islamic thought all over the world?